Hi guys, welcome back to Nyx Reads, to a very late July reading wrap up. I hope you guys are enjoying your summer and are reading great books. Feel free to subscribe if you love bookish content and leave this video a thumbs up if you like monthly reading wrap ups. I'm having a great summer so far. I've been really enjoying myself. I have both of my sisters here visiting me, which is why I've been out and about. We're doing a lot of activities outside and doing like city trips, so I didn't have a chance to do my reading wrap up at the beginning of August like I would have usually done, but that's all right. I still make time to listen to audiobooks and read. And in July I read, I think it's 7 books. It's been a while, so I'm gonna rely on my notes, and for this one I'm just gonna go through them in chronological order. The first one was The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas, and I have a separate book review up for this, which is only about 5 minutes long. It's spoiler free. To keep it short, I loved this book. I had high hopes for it, but I think it met my expectations. It was not perfect, but it was very enjoyable to me. It takes place in Mexico after the War of Independence, and we have our main character, Beatriz, who's a young woman who is in a very poor and unfortunate situation. So her kind of ticket out of that is marrying a guy named Don Rodolfo, and he whisks her away to his countryside villa, so his mansion, which is called, what is it called? I already forgot. Hacienda San Isidro, and she starts to hear voices and sees strange visions. So she thinks something's wrong with that house, or is something wrong with her? This is very much a slow burn story with classic haunted house elements in it and a romance that I really did root for. One of the bigger weak points of this book was definitely the characterization, but overall I did like the writing style and I just enjoyed the story in general. So I gave this about, I think, 4 out of 5 stars. If that sounds somewhat intriguing to you, definitely put this on your fall reading list. The next book I finished has been on my TBR for ages. There's a very old video from Katie from Chapter Stacks, whose reviews I really enjoy and trust. And I think she put this book in her top romance novels or something like that. And for some reason, it just intrigued me. I saw it on Book Outlet, so I just picked it up just to, get it off my TBR. It's A Certain Slant of Light by Laura Whitcomb, and this is the ultimate #sad girl book. I find it kind of odd how much I enjoyed it. It kind of scared me that way. So this is a ghost love story. So we have Helen. She is a ghost who has been roaming around town for more than 130 years. Nobody can see her, nobody can speak to her. She's just kind of following whatever person she attaches herself to, until one day she's roaming through school and one of the students looks at her and even can talk to her. And from there, an impossible love story starts. Not gonna lie, first I was kind of skeptical when I started reading it, but it was honestly shocking how fast I went through this book because it's kind of addictive. This feels like a throwback to Twilight. Yeah, so I think if I have read this more than 10 years ago, I would have probably hyped this up so much. Anyway, so this love story is just completely over the top. There's so many incredibly dramatic things happening in here. So in one way, I was really enjoying it because I ate up the story so fast. But on the other hand, I can see all the flaws in it that maybe if I were a teenager, kind of like with Twilight, you would have just glanced over, like overlooked. But one of the reasons I gave this only like 3 or 3.5 out of 5 stars is because there were so many serious topics handled in this book, and I feel like they were handled carelessly. They were romanticized, I want to say. I think if this book was would have been published now, I think they would have tacked on maybe 100 pages just to really resolve those issues a bit better to our standards these days. But yeah, there's just a few flaws in this book. As a teen, I would have been completely obsessed with this. I just know. Moving on to a nonfiction book that I listened to this month is Come As You Are, The Surprising New Science That Will Transform Your Sex Life by Emily Nagoski. This book focuses on sexual well-being, autonomy, and pleasure. I do want to give a caveat though, this is really more geared towards cis women and their partners. Kind of like with all nonfiction, there are parts that you forget very fast, and then there's maybe one or two facts that really do stick with you. The main takeaway that I had from this book is, if you ever feel like you're the only one who has a certain kind of experience, or maybe you think your anatomy is off and you feel alone, most likely is you're just normal, and you're basically made to believe to think of yourself and your pleasure and even your anatomy in a certain way because of essentially the patriarchy, and women are still oppressed in a lot of ways. And I think it's a very important topic to really own this part of yourself. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, and it's not on the lower side of the rating because I didn't enjoy it, but because I thought the structure of the book was just not what I expected. So she works a lot with people that she obviously changed the names, but with case studies essentially, which I didn't really enjoy that part. And also I thought that at times it was a bit too, it read kind of a bit like a Cosmopolitan article, and when I honestly expected kind of a more scientifical approach to it. But it's fine, it's just, I guess I have wrong expectations for this book. I very much respect on how she puts an emphasis on the emotional and internal work that you can and have to do to understand yourself, which is great. And who do I recommend this to? Anybody who feels mature enough to educate themselves about this topic, especially if maybe I started talking to you about this book and you felt kind of squirmy and are like, oh, why would you read something like that? Well, if you think that way, then maybe it's because of patriarchy again. So to me, this represents an important feminist topic, and I think if you read this book and even have just like one thing that you can take away that you learned from it, I think that's a win. Next, I finished a book from my classics reading challenge. So I finished Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne, and this is the German copy that I have just because the original one is written in French and my French is just not advanced enough to read a classic in that language. This fictional classic takes place in the early 19th century, where Phileas Fogg, an Englishman, takes a bet to travel around the world in 80 days. This book surprised me in many ways, positive and kind of more negatively. What I thought was great about this book is this was so much more accessible than I thought. So if you are scared to pick up a classic or a French classic, I think this is a great book to start because it really reads like a fast-paced adventure book, even if obviously the prose is a bit outdated, but it's honestly like something that you would go through quite fast. This book is full of adventure and action. It doesn't really linger on internal monologues. You're kind of a bit detached from Phileas Fogg, in my opinion. You're kind of observing him from quite far away is what felt like, because you're a bit closer to his, what do you call it, a butler? Like his assistant, Passepartout, who is a Frenchman. Their dynamic reminded me a bit of Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot and what's his name, Hastings. That's kind of what it reminded me of, because it was like Passepartout is really looking up to Phileas Fogg, but sometimes he thinks he's ridiculous, sometimes he's jealous of him. It's kind of like that mixed feelings relationship between two men that I think you see a lot in classics. And kind of like Hercule Poirot, Fogg was just a bit too perfect. He was always calm, he was never frazzled, no matter what kind of obstacle there was in his way. So that leads to you not feeling very close to any of the characters, but I don't think that's what the author is trying to do. As I said, it's really more like an adventuresque story that jumps from one event to the next. And then there's this whole like side plot thing with a crime that I didn't know what was in here, which I didn't love. So all in all, I do think it's a good adventure book, a great starter classic, if you will. But I was just not in love with the point of view and the way you're so detached from the characters in this book. So it's really more, okay, this happens and then the next thing happens. Next up, Malibu Rising from Taylor Jenkins Reid. part of my summer TBR or reading challenge. She does it again. She invents a fictional character or multiple fictional celebrity characters, and you feel like they actually existed. They are so real. So this book takes place in Malibu, as the title suggests, in the 80s, where the very famous Reba kids, who are the kids of rock star McReba, throw their annual house party, and by the end of the night, their house is in flames. And honestly, that's not even like the main mystery part of the story, I would say. It's really about their lives, what is going on, what happened in the past. Unsurprisingly, this was completely bingeable. So if you're in a reading slump and you want to pick something out that you're going to fly through, pick up any book from Taylor Jenkins Reid, at least her newer ones. I haven't tried her older ones yet. I have One True Love's ready in my Libby app, so I might read that next. But also, very unsurprisingly, there's tragic love stories in here that will just break your heart and you will feel so invested. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. It wasn't completely perfect, which is fine. I still recommend it. But so kind of like in The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six, she does the same thing again, where she, or the author, throws a wild card in here that I think was not really necessary. I didn't really care about it, honestly. I would have liked to, you know, spend those pages on the characters that we've built up already. And the other thing is, I mean, this is under 400 pages and there's 4, is it 4? Yeah, 4 siblings plus, you know, their parents and their friends and family, whatever. There's quite a few characters in here. So not all of them are fleshed out. So it is what it is. You can't have it all. I still nevertheless recommend it. If you love complicated family dynamics and tragedies in love lives, then you're for sure gonna enjoy this. So after reading the Hacienda, Certain Slant of Light, Malibu Rising, those were fast-paced reads. I wanted another book that I could read through super fast. That's just what I'm in the mood for right now, and August is no different. So I read You Love Me by Caroline Kepnes, which this is also part of my summer TBR, if I'm not mistaken. So this is part 3 of You, where we follow Joe Goldberg, who is a stalker. It's very interesting because these books are written in the second person. So the first book I loved, where Joe becomes obsessed with Beck. Beck is an aspiring writer in New York City, and there's a lot of chaotic things that happen in that book. And book 3, I mean, it was fine. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, but it was, to be honest, just more of the same. It is still very fun to root for the bad guy because you're kind of attached to Joe. So in a very twisted, dark way, you kind of want the psycho stalker to succeed. I'm keeping things very vague here just in case you haven't read the first 2 books. If you haven't, do read at least the first one. As I said, it is the best and it's just so much fun to be in the mind of someone who's just not completely right and thinks he's entitled to women that he stalks. So in this third book, Joe kind of wants to change, basically trying out this new persona, but his true self does shine through. I mean, his thoughts are funny. I had a few moments where I did have to laugh out loud. Just his total lack of self-awareness gets me every time because, you know, while he's the one who is following people around, he points out the flaws in other people and thinks he's better than everybody else. Obviously, there's suspense subplots to this, but what this and also the first 2 books do is it's kind of also like a slice of life thing. There's, for example, a lot of random thoughts that pop into his brain and so many pop culture references to literature and movie, to a point where sometimes if I haven't read something or if I haven't watched a show, you kind of feel like left out. You're not really getting everything 100%, but it's fine. Like you're always going to be able to follow the story. So it was okay. It was a good 3 stars. It didn't blow me away. Well, I read the 4th book, which to be honest, I thought this was the last. But yeah, I'm probably going to pick up the next book just because it's interesting, but it it wasn't like the first. And lastly, part of my spring TBR, I listened to The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, which was a very, very popular, beloved book. The premise is Addie LaRue is a French girl in the 1800s who wants to be free. She does not want to be married to some guy and bears children, and that's the end of her life essentially. So she makes a deal with not maybe the, but a devil, where in exchange for total freedom, she will live forever, but she cannot leave a mark in the world, which translates to nobody can remember her. So as soon as she walks out of the room, the person who she just talked to has absolutely no recollection of her, which leads her living an eternal life, but also a very, very lonely life. Present day in New York City, she goes to a bookshop where she thinks she can, as usual, just walk out with the book, because as soon as she walks out, nobody will remember her. But the owner actually comes after her and confronts her because he does remember her. So she's completely taken aback. For sure, you will enjoy this book if you like lyrical prose. It's not as heavy as, let's say, The Night Circus by Anne Morgenstern, but it's definitely focused on beautiful writing. There's queer representation in this book, which is great, and I have to say I do like the ending without giving anything away. I didn't manage to warm up to the characters, and seeing as this is quite the long book, it was not enough to make me actually like and root for the characters, because essentially, I mean, you kind of jump between the timelines, but it's just a lot of the same. So there's a lot of repetitions throughout, which gets a bit old at some point, if you ask me. I mean, obviously you get a piece of new information every time you go back in the story or you look at a certain moment, but all in all, it felt a bit redundant to me. For Addie to have lived, I forgot how many hundreds of years, she was lacking a character arc. I don't think there was any personal growth within her, at least no significant one. And even within the story frame, I didn't think that there was anything new there, because, I mean, yes, somebody recognized her, so obviously her day-to-day life changed, but there was, I don't know, I didn't feel like she went through a big change within herself, which, to be honest, that's what we're expecting in books, right? I also thought that the topic of mental health, I thought it was handled a bit carelessly. I mean, V.E. Schwab is a great author. I have read Vicious by her, which I want to reread so I can read Vengeful. So if you are a fan of her, any of her works, I would probably tell you, yes, go ahead and read this, especially if you love beautiful writing. It was just not my personal perfect read, and it was a bit long for my taste for what it was. So these were all the 7 books that I read in July. It was a quick wrap up because it's hot and humid, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a comment on which is the best book that you read last month, and feel free to subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed it. See you guys next time. Bye.